Hello, everybody. This is Christina Morgan. I wanted to record this really quick video for you on some best practices for tracking your new Paycheck Protection loan. I know that the activity needs to be fairly well tracked between the income coming in, the loan itself, and the expenses associated with that loan in order to be able to track forgiveness. We're not going to go over the various expense potentials in here other than the generic ones because there is still some side things that are up in the air and some guidance that's still needed in regards to what expenses are done. This is just going to be on how we get this recorded in the books to make it easier for you at the time to present reports to the bank and also for yourself to know where you are on those expenses and tracking those expenses in your QuickBooks file. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use an online program, QuickBooks Test Drive program. So I'm using QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that for everybody. All right, so this is an online version of QuickBooks Online Plus. If you do not have QuickBooks Online Plus, there'll be a couple of things that are going to be a little bit different for you, and I'll go through those during the process so you know how you can track it for yourself, okay? When you first log in to your QuickBooks, you're normally on your dashboard screen, and we're going to need to do a few things up front to get us ready to be able to track this activity. Our first step is to create some new accounts so we can keep track of the loan and some interest and other items associated with the loan that you've taken out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our accounting and we're going to go to chart of accounts and we're going to create 3 accounts, okay? Now these 3 accounts that we're going to create are associated with this loan in particular. So we're going to go ahead and click on new, and the first account we're going to create is a long-term liability. So this loan is a 2-year loan, and as a 2-year loan, it is a long-term note. So we're going to go ahead and record that as PPP notes payable. You can give it a little bit different name if you want, but this is the name that I was going to go ahead and use here. Give us an example. So we're tracking the Paycheck Protection Loan long-term. Going to go ahead and hit save and new. The second liability that we're going to record is the portion that we believe is going to be forgivable, but is currently not forgivable at this moment. They have not forgiven it, but we want to go ahead and keep track of that so we know where we are. So this is going to be a current liability, and I'm just going to call this notes payable forgivable portion. Okay, so this is the portion of the loan that we feel that we've met the requirements, we've expensed a certain payroll costs, rent costs, utility costs that we're going to be able to get forgiven. And we want to be able to keep track of that in our books. The last one we're going to use is if you are tracking the interest that's accruing. If you're on an accrual basis and you're tracking accounts payable, accounts receivable, and other notes and those kinds of things, you're going to want to have the interest that's accruing on this note. While it is at 1%, it is something that is still going to be getting accrued and deferred in the first 6 months until you have forgiveness. And there's not been any real clear guidance on whether the interest will be fully forgiven if the loan is fully forgiven, or if the interest will still be due. So we're going to go ahead and have this out here and available. Now this is also going to be another current liability, and this is going to be accrued interest payable, PPP. Okay, so it's related to the Paycheck Protection, and it's going to be the accrued interest. All right, so we have created those 3 accounts, 2 other current liabilities and 1 long-term liability account. The next part that we're going to do, in order to track the expenses, one of the tools inside QuickBooks Online Plus, if you're not already using this, is the ability to track expenses by customer or by donor. If you don't have this, if you're not in Plus, you're not going to be able to do this one portion. So you won't be able to go in and turn on this feature. And if you already are tracking your income by donor or income by customer, you already have this feature turned on. But just in case you don't have the feature on, I want to go ahead and show you where that is and how you can turn that on. So from any one of your main screens, there's going to be a gear up in the upper right-hand corner. So you're going to click on that gear, and you're going to go under your company into account and settings. Under Accountant Settings, you're going to go to Expense tab. You will see here it says Track Expenses and Items by Customer. If that is off, if you are not already set up to track your expenses and items by customer, you would want to go ahead. If it says on, you're good, you can move forward. If it says off, you want to go over to the little pencil underneath Help and the X here, and that allows you to edit this particular option. And then you can do the little checkbox here to toggle this on. So now this says on, that we're going to be tracking our expenses and items by customer, and then we're going to hit save. All right. Now that turns on that feature inside the software. Now what that does is inside the expense and check items, when you are doing an expense or you're writing a check, it adds a field in there that allows us to put a customer name in that field. All of the expenses where we add that customer name, we'll be able to use the report tool to pull all of those expenses and have one report with all those expenses in one space. So that's why we're going to go ahead and track it that way. So let's get this loan entered. Okay, so let's just say that you've got notice that you're going to get your loan that you received your loan on the 1st. You signed the documents at the end of April and you were able to get your loan on the 1st. So we're going to go ahead and record a bank deposit to record this note that you have signed on for. So we have the 1st of May. Now, my customer that I was thinking I would be using for this is PPP funds. You can, name it after your bank, name Small Business Administration, your option, but I think PPP funds works fairly well. When you create that, you want to make sure that it says customer or donor in the type, that you don't end up accidentally creating a vendor or an employee, because you can't change that once you've created it. So make sure it says customer and then go ahead and hit save. Now we're going to pick that note payable that we have as our original note payable. And so I'm going to select that, and then I'll just go ahead and put a couple of notes in here. So this is my original Paycheck protection loan, and then this is going to be due on 2022. So it's going to be due in 2 years. All right. And let's just say that we got $25,000. So we have $25,000 loan, and then we can go ahead and hit save and close. All right, so that's already recorded now. So if I go to my balance sheet, so I go to reports, I go to balance sheet, and I come over here, I can come down and I see PPP note payable, $25,000. So that's the original recording of that loan that I have. All right, so now we're going to start looking at the expense side. So as we have expenses that are incurred and paid during the 8-week period associated with this loan, we're going to be recording various activity. We want to make sure that we track those expenses towards the loan. So we're going to go ahead and enter a check. So I'm going to click on New. We're going to enter a check. Now, let's just say that I pay my rent on the 5th of every month, okay? So let's just pick a vendor here. Let's see, like Hall Properties, for example. And let's say that's who they pay their rent to. So we have a rent payment, and so this is monthly rent, May 2020. And let's just pay my rent is $375. Okay, so that would be how I would normally record my $375 rent check. Now, if I'm using the customer tracking, because I want to make sure that I'm tracking this with my loan, I want to enter that customer name that I had created originally for this particular loan. Now, if I don't have QuickBooks Online Plus and I was not able to do that, I want to go ahead and maybe in the description field, go ahead and put PPP. And that way, when I go in and pull up my expenses later, I can sort and pull out all the expenses that have PPP in the expense title. For those of you that do have the ability to turn on the online tracking, we're just going to add it in the customer field. Okay, so we're going to hit save and new on that particular one. Now, let's say that we get paid twice a month. We get paid on the 15th and we get paid on the 31st. So let's just go ahead and say it's the 15th, and I'm going to go ahead and record some payroll. I'm just going to get a couple of checks recorded here. So we have 2 employees, so that's perfect. We have Emily Plott, and this is going to be the 15th of the month. All right, and she is our officer, so we have officer salaries for her. And I'm going to have gross wages. So her gross wages, let's say are $3,000. Okay, so we have $3,000 in gross wages for her. And then we have her taxes that are taken out of her account. Let's see, do I have payroll liabilities? Okay, so they do not have payroll liabilities in this online program, so I'm going to go ahead and just add those really quick. So that's payroll tax payable. All right, so this is my employee withholding that I'm going to have with taken out of my check. And so let's just say that she has $750 taken out of her check. So then we have our payroll taxes. So of the payroll taxes, you're going to be responsible for the employer tax. We have Social Security, Medicare taxes, and then we have state unemployment if you have more than 4 employees. Okay, so let's just say we have Social Security and Med employer tax, and we know that that is 7.65%. And then let's say that we already have, well, she's not going to have state unemployment, but we'll just go ahead and have a space in here, state unemployment, employer tax. And that's going to be a 0 because she makes too much money at this point in the year that she would have state unemployment. And then we're going to have our payroll liabilities, and this is the employer taxes, and that is $229.25. Okay, now for tracking for the PPP, again, we want to make sure that we record the things that are eligible for the PPP. The Social Security and Medicare employer tax are not eligible. The state unemployment tax is eligible, and even though this is blank, if I want, I could go ahead and put that in there. For those that do not have the customer tracking, we're going to go ahead and add the PPP before the ones that we know are eligible for this, okay? Now we're going to go and record an amount for John. Now, John is our hourly employee who's working with the organization. So he has his gross wages. And let's just say, so he's now making, let's say $400, okay? All right, and then we have payroll liabilities, and we have the employee withholding, and he is probably going to have just this part taken out. So we have 3060, and then we have our taxes. So we have our Social Security and Med employer tax, and that's going to be the 7.65. And then we're going to have the state unemployment. And let's just say you're at 2% because that's the minimum, that's the beginning of what people have for their state unemployment. And then we have the employer taxes here, and that is 30, 60, and 8. Okay, so his net take home is the 369.40. And again, we want to make sure that we include only in the lines that are eligible for the forgiveness, the PPP information. And again, for those who do not have the customer tracking, we are going to go in and do this. Now, we want to make sure that we, you don't have to do the PPP portion in the description if you have the customer tracking. I'm just making sure that I put that in there so anyone who's looking at this would be able to do this as well. All right, save and new. All right, let's just also say that we have our utility payment. So we've got PG&E as our vendor. On the 15th of the month, we're going to be paying our electric bill. And I'm going to add that PPP already. And this is monthly electric. Okay, and let's just say that's $175. And again, PPP funds. Okay. All right, now I'm only entering in for May because you guys don't want this video to go on forever. So we're gonna go ahead and have that information entered. So we know that the information is entered. So how do we get to the information? How do we see where we're at so far in the process? One of the things that we can do is we can look at an income by customer summary report or income by donor summary if that's how your customers show up. So if I start typing in customer, for example, I have income by customer summary. What the income by customer summary report does is it pulls in all of the income and all of the expenses associated with a specific customer. So as I'm looking at my report, and this is going right now through the 5th, which is through today, it's going to have my expense that I had for the rent that I had entered on the 5th, right? It has that as an expense. Well, I don't want to see all this other information when I'm pulling up this report specifically to be able to give to the SBA, right? So I have a couple different options. I can just drill into the total if I just click here, and that'll take me into the total and that'll show me my expenses for that particular one. Or I can create a custom report that I can use later. Now inside this online program, it lets me create the custom report, but it does not let me save the custom report. But I'll show you how you would do that anyway, just in case. So you click on the customize, you go down to the filter, and you put in the name of the customer that you want this particular report to be, right? So I want anything that says PPP funds, I want my income by customer to just show me that customer. And then I would just save the customization. Save the customization, name that report anything you want. So like I could name this PPP funds, and then I would hit save, okay? It's gonna actually let me save the report. So I've saved that custom report that I can go back in and look. Now, right now, this is only showing me my expenses through the 5th because that's the date of the report. So I know I've entered expenses in through the 15th. So I'm going to go ahead and change this so I can show my total of my expense. So the total number of expenses that I have recorded so far are $3,958 through the 15th of the month for this. If I want to be able to see the detail, I can click on that and it will bring it up and it'll show me the line item detail. So I can see $3,000 for salaries and wages, I have $400 for wage expense, I've got $8 for unemployment, I've got my rent, my gas and electric. So this allows me to be able to keep up and be able to produce an Excel file or a PDF file that I can give to the bank with my list of my expenses. If they want detail, they want line item detail of what I spent, I can actually just click on the expense, drill down a little further, and it gives me a line item detail of each item, when it was paid, who it was paid to. They can then use this to tie to my payroll reports or tie to invoices or other items that I'm going to provide to them. But this gives them a summary of all that information in one spot. For those that don't have customer tracking, you can see your PPP shows up inside that memo and description. So if I don't have the customer tracking and I want to be able to go out and see those expenses, I'm going to go to a regular profit and loss. And let's just go ahead and look at this month because that's where those expenses are that I've recorded. Right now, because of what I've done, this is mostly my stuff. It looks like they had a few other items in here, but I'm going to go ahead and drill into the expense. And then I can see all of the expenses related, but you can see some that don't have the PPP because these aren't eligible. So then I would pull this out into Excel, and then I could sort by the ones that have PPP in order to be able to provide that to the bank to give them that information, okay? Now, let's go back and think about that liability account. So the reason that I'd created the liability account is I want to kind of keep track of the total loan that I had been given and the portion of the loan that's going to be forgivable. So when I'm looking at my reports, let me go back to my custom report, which it seems like it saved for me. It did. Awesome. So I go in and I can see my total expenses. So through the 5th, when I created my rent, let's say I want to just record this every time I have some PPP expenses. I can make a journal entry to reclassify those items that are forgivable that I have incurred at that point. So I'm going to go to new and I'm going to go to journal entry, and I'm going to have this be on the 5th so I know the date of my transaction. And I have my original note payable, and I have $375, and this is rent to be forgiven. And then I have PPP, forgivable portion. Okay, so I've recorded that $375 from the original note payable up into the portion that I think is going to end up being a forgivable expense. It's still on the liability section of my report. Okay, so I'm going to do that there. All right, now I come in on the 15th of the month, and I have got some new expenses. And so I'm going to look at my expenses here and I say, okay, now I've already recorded my rent, but I've got some gas and electric, and I have some officer salaries, and I have some wage expense and some state unemployment. And I want to record those items as well, move those items in between the two. So I'm going to go into a journal entry. I'm going to go to the 15th. I've got my note payable. And for me, I like to do detail, officer salary to be forgiven. Helps if I can spell. And then we have PPP note payable. And then we had $400, and that was my wages. And then I have my $8, and that was my state unemployment. Okay. And then we had our electric bill. Okay. And then all of this moves to my forgivable. And this is expenses on 0515. All right, so then we have the amounts that we've moved that we believe are going to be forgiven as of that particular day. Okay, so then we hit save. All right, so now let's say that we need to record those accrued expenses. So we accrued interest. So we think we're going to have interest, and we think we're going to need to pay interest expense, or we're on an accrual basis, and we want to make sure that we've recorded that. So we had a $25,000 loan. The interest rate on that loan is 1%. So that's for the year on that particular loan. And then obviously I'm going to be recording this for 1 month. So I have $20.83 in interest expense for the month of May that I'm going to record to my books. So I'm going to go to my journal entry, and this is going to be for the month of May. And we have our accrued interest payable. This is going to be May accrued interest on PPP. And then we're going to have interest paid. They have an interest expense. Nope. No, they don't. Okay, so we'll have to interest. I keep thinking I'm seeing something that says interest paid, but I guess I'm not. Interest paid. All right, and that's an expense. All right, money. So I've got my accrued interest, and I've got that recorded here. All right, so now we can go and we can look at our reports. So if I'm looking at my balance sheet for this particular month, so if I look at this month, I have recorded my original $25,000 note payable. I've adjusted $3,958 of that note payable up into the forgivable portion, and I've got accrued interest of $20.83 on that loan that I may end up having to pay when this is all said and done. Okay, so that's getting it recorded, that's getting it expensed, making sure that you're tracking the forgivable portion versus the portion that's still left remaining to be allocated to expenses. And you would continue that process every time you have an expense, or maybe just at the end of the month. I would probably suggest at least twice a month when you do your payroll, so you can keep track of this and see where you are with the forgivable portion of the loan, and then the portion of the loan that you're going to actually have to pay back if you're not able to get to that level of that loan. They did give you 2.5 times your payroll cost. So if you don't have rent and utilities and some mortgage interest or obligation interest, you'll want to go ahead and know that you're going to have some of that you're going to end up having to pay back. At the end, when you come to the forgivable time, when we go to the bank and we ask for forgiveness for that, and we provide all the expenses to them, anything that is remaining in here, technically the portion that we've all moved up into the forgivable, we're going to be able to move that forgivable portion into income. So we would make a journal entry to debit to our note payable and a credit to our grant income for this forgiven portion of the loan. Any portion of the loan that's remaining that we have down here that we were not able to write off or move up into the forgivable section, that will stay. And as we make payments on that loan between now and May of 2022, we would record those payments against those payable amounts. Okay. I know that was well, not as quick as I would have liked it to be, but hopefully you were able to get some good information from this, and this will allow you to use your QuickBooks file to track this loan a little bit easier. It'll make it a little bit easier for you at the end when we're trying to accumulate all of the expenses and give those expenses to the bank for them to be able to see what we're using their money for. If you have any additional questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to me. I did try to make this as generic as possible, so there may be some items that you feel didn't cover you specifically. So definitely reach out and we'll see what we can do to help you. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a really nice night. Thanks. Bye.